Hello everyone. Okay, we're back and we're talking about the Nicomachean Ethics, and we're now chapter 7, still in book 1, and we're on the hunt now, as we've always been, for this notion of eudaimonia. What does it mean? Remember, I've been stressing, stay away from trying to translate it, but Aristotle has made some progress on this. He's bringing things back down to earth. He's had his criticisms of Plato. Check that out. Done a couple of videos on that. And we've got this notion of this best good, that eudaimonia is this uniquely human good. It's not abstract. It's going to be some kind of practical good that's connected to us. And Aristotle offers a few ways to start thinking about this. We've been talking about, this best good as that which is desirable, which things that activities aim at, like a telos, an end goal. That helps. That's one way to think of it. Aristotle's looked at some of the problems of that. But wants to, sort of broaden this. Yeah, this notion of finding this greatest good is going to be something that is best. It's desired for itself and in itself. But, there's lots of things that we desire for themselves and in themselves. As we pointed out in previous videos, Aristotle, yeah, sure, you can live a life of pleasure. You're just on the hunt for pleasure. That's all you're doing. Right? You just, oh yeah, I'm not out for pleasure for anything further than that. I just look for pleasure. That's my life's goal, is just to do that, is to live a life of pleasure. Sure, you can do that. People do it. Aristotle's is no fool. He recognizes that people can structure their life in a variety of ways. But he takes a bit of a different angle. Instead of thinking about the best good in terms of desirability or desirability in and of itself, he starts thinking about the notion of things being complete. And remember, Aristotle thinks that we can have completeness in our life. We can have, happiness and feel complete. So this best good is not just something that's going to be desirable in and of itself. Lots of things can fulfill that. But it's problematic when you try to put that into practice. But Aristotle says, let's think of it now in terms of something being complete. And that shifts his discussion a little bit, and we can dig a little bit more deeply into this notion of the agathos, the uniquely human good, when we think of it in terms of this completeness. Now, what are we going to do now? Well, eudaimonia is going to be complete, something complete for us, that it's going to give our lives meaning. This is where other things can run into trouble. When you pursue the life of pleasure, is that a complete life? It can be sort of one fun thing after another, but is that a sense of completeness? Is that a sense of a life with meaning? Aristotle doesn't think so. He thinks just kind of going on from one pleasure to one pleasure after another is not going to be something that is fulfilling. So we're introducing more terminology here, following Aristotle as he's thickening his discussion, right? So this is one time that I want to stress that, Aristotle, when he's talking about eudaimonia and happiness, it's not this kind of woohoo, I'm just having a great time. No, you could be in a state of eudaimonia and still be having a bad day. So it's not to be confused with just pleasure, right? That's part of the story, but don't identify it with eudaimonia. So what makes life complete? What makes life worth living? That's what eudaimonia is all about. This greatest good that we're looking leaves you to say, yes, this is what I want to, this is what I want out of life. I'm now complete. So in that sense, it's something we desire. Eudaimonia is something that we desire. It, in and of itself, yes, but it gives us a sense of completeness in life. All right, so if that's the case, if we've got something that's complete, we desire it in and of itself, it's uniquely human, we can offer some more reflections that, well, eudaimonia is not going to be just something that happens to us. It's not something that's handed to you. We've seen Aristotle say it's something that you have to work at. So eudaimonia is going to be a practical good. It is linked closely with activity and uniquely human activities. And as I mentioned in a previous video, What does it mean to be something, to do a uniquely human activity? Aristotle's going to talk a little bit about this now. So in this sense, what we're going to do is dig a little bit more into Aristotle's ethics and look at what has been referred to as the function argument. He doesn't really call it that, but in the literature, the secondary literature on Aristotle, talk about the function argument. You find function arguments all over the place in ancient thought. You find them in Plato as well. So what's the function argument? Well, Aristotle says, let's consider a human being qua carpenter, human being as a carpenter. Let's look at that first. So we start off with, shall we say, a very concrete example, and we're going to abstract a little bit. Remember, to abstract means to, take away from the concrete situation or to remove some elements of a concrete situation. So we're looking at a human being qua carpenter, basically a carpenter. Well, if we go and look at carpenters, what's their good? What did we mean by that? Well, it lies within the function. What's the function of a carpenter? Well, doing carpentry work. So their function is the carpentry work that they do, and the good of that is within the function. In other words, the good of a carpenter is doing the job, carpentry, doing it well. So in that sense, you have human qua carpenter has a purpose and has a function and has that kind of a good. So this is very important in Aristotle's thought in general. Things have purposes, they have functions, they have goods. They're for the sake of things. So the carpenters have a purpose. Aristotle uses another analogy, or another sort of aspect of a human being, talks about the eye. And purposes play a role in Aristotle's biology as well. So the eye has a purpose, namely to see. So Aristotle says things like, well, if you as a human being have a purpose, if you as a carpenter, you have a purpose to do carpentry work, and you have a good to do the carpentry work well. The parts of your body, the eye, the ear, nose, etc., they have purposes, they have functions, and the function of the eye is not just to see, but it's to see well. And that's why we wear glasses, so we can, the eye that can't, like mine, I have problems with my eyes, so I wear glasses. So not only can my eyes do their function, but they can do it well with the assistance of lenses. So they have purposes. So Aristotle says that, well, that seems to be the case with all your body parts. All your activities have purposes. Well, it seems really odd and really strange to say now when we abstract and look at the human qua human, that you just as a human have no purpose? Aristotle thinks that's ridiculous. Now, that's exactly what somebody like Jean-Paul Sartre would say, that meaning is all over here. Right? Certainly not in terms of eyes having purpose, but meaning is all within the projects that you create, right? So all meaning is manufactured and created by us, right? We make up projects and we do things and we find meaning in that. But somebody like Sartre would say, oh, you've got to be kidding. Human qua human. There's no purpose in being a human. There's no particular function in being a human. Functions are all in things we've created. So that's a key split with somebody like Aristotle. And that's why Sartre, likes to call us things like we're a useless passion or whatever. And we've seen Aristotle reject that view that our passions are just something that can go on, and that's all we are, is just passion generating and passion seeking machines. That he rejects that view. So we do have a kind of purpose. And so Aristotle thinks the way to unpack eudaimonia is to look at where the good in the function lies of a human being qua human. So what would our purpose? So we have a purpose. And the question is, okay, what's that going to be? Well, Aristotle's going to say, in order to find out what our purpose is, we have to ask questions like, well, what is it about us that's uniquely human? What's something about us that nothing else shares? So in this sense, Aristotle is saying, well, we've got things like jobs we do, But that may not be uniquely human. Have to see about that. But certainly if we look at eyes, like I have eyes, well, so does my dog. So if we now shift and look at a little bit of biology, and Aristotle, prided himself on being a biologist as well, wrote a lot on biology. If we look at the activities that animals and plants and humans have in a biological way, they all undergo nutrition. So plants do this, animals, and us. So there's nothing really unique about that, those kinds of functions. So your body, for instance, is not really uniquely human in that sense. It undergoes nutrition. Well, plants do that, so do animals. It has, again, an eye that sees. Well, so do animals. Other things like sensation and movement. Yeah, I'm moving around, but big deal. So does a dog. So do all kinds. I can sense things. Maybe plants don't have sensations like I do. Like if I hit my knuckle or something, I go, that hurts. Well, an animal has that as well. Movement, all these things. So we've got animals and us. What's really unique to human beings? It's this one. According to Aristotle, that's what really makes human qua human, is to have reason. And I'm going to put have here in scare quotes because Aristotle is going to be very concerned to unpack the notion of having reason. Not all parts of the soul have reason in the same way. We'll look more in detail at that as we go along through the Nicomachean Ethics. But just as a first glance at it, we can have reason in a couple of different ways, namely reason govern action. Animals, according to Aristotle, don't have that. They don't have reason governing. They may have causes for their actions and whatnot, but they don't make reasoned choices the way we do. We are special in that sense, in that particular way of having reason. It can govern our actions. We also are special in having reason that we can have modes of thought, or maybe even pure thought or pure contemplation. Again, animals don't have that. So in this sense, so far, we've got some unique aspects and shared aspects. So we're part of the sort of the general, bios, the sphere of life. Yeah, we share a lot of things with plants and animals, but this is the special human aspect of our existence. It's with reason and what we have. So this human agathos, remember, it's a human agathos, this greatest good, this eudaimonia, putting this, what we've seen here, all this together now, we've got something that goes like this. The agathos or eudaimonia is going to be an activity, so it's a practical thing. So it's going to be something ongoing. Remember, activities involve time. They're not just single states at an instant. It's an ongoing thing. So it's an activity. It's dynamic. It can even change a little bit, but it's an activity of psyche, which is roughly translated as soul, in accordance with, and we've seen this word already, arete, which is sometimes translated as virtue. So eudaimonia is going to be something uniquely human, because remember, animals can't have it. Even children are not capable of it. Children eventually can become capable of eudaimonia, but not at young ages. It's a certain activity of soul in accordance with arete. And in this sense, it's got to be the best, the most desirable, and the most complete. So, what we've got is Aristotle refers to this more or less as the starting point. The first principle, the arche. So this is Aristotle's starting point of ethics. The arche, that's this here. This agathos, this eudaimonia is an activity of psyche in accordance with arete. Well, what kinds of activities are we talking about? He's going to get into those. What kinds of arete are we talking about? So this is going to be split up and examined in more detail. But when Aristotle talks about his starting point, this is really what he's referring to. Now, the rest of the Nicomachean Ethics is going to basically be unpacking this in a great in great detail. But Aristotle makes a number of points about the arche at the end of this chapter. The starting point, okay? So the arche can be different in different disciplines. The arche of ethics is this. And Aristotle says we have to be careful. Remember, picking up on what he said in an earlier chapter about starting points, that they can differ. Not only can they differ, but starting points and early aspects of disciplines can differ, if you recall, in terms of their rigor. Right? Remember earlier on, Aristotle said that we have to be careful that our methodology is sound, because good methodology means that the level of rigor in the inquiry matches the level of rigor that's possible in the subject. So that's his first methodological point. Another one is the methodological point of how you come by the actual arche of a discipline. And there are different ways that we come by the arche of disciplines. And so his second point is that with mathematics and other kinds of disciplines, there's a different way of arriving at the first principles of mathematics than there is with the first principles of ethics. The first principle of ethics, the one I've listed here, it's arrived at through some discussion of this function argument, but Aristotle doesn't think this is a perfect knockdown argument. These are analogies. He's drawing analogies of, human beings with human beings as carpenters. Analogies of the human being as human qua human as an analogy with the eye. So he's not saying this is a perfect knockdown argument to give you absolutely an arche, which is absolutely something you can be completely sure of. That's not the level of rigor that you can have in ethics. So the starting point of ethics is going to be, this is different than mathematics. We just don't have the same kinds of starting points, the absolute certainty of starting points that you would have in math and in logic. You're not going to have this in ethics. So we have 2 points about methodology. The first one we've seen earlier is that the level of rigor when you're making arguments within ethics, what to do, how to analyze, the rigor of those arguments is not going to be identical to that of math. It's not less than, it's different. Aristotle says that it's not that we're just lousy at doing ethics or ethics is a lousy discipline. It's just a different discipline than mathematics. So the level of rigor will be, like a good level of rigor in ethics is just fine, but it's going to look different than in mathematics. An appropriate first starting point, an arche in ethics, there's no problems with this, but it's arrived at through a general kind of discussion, an analysis, and an abstraction from maybe analogies here. It's not going to be something that you just have immediate intuitions of like you do in mathematics. So we've got 2 methodological points now. Keep in mind that you have to have your mind tuned to doing ethics. It's different than doing mathematics. And we've got our starting point of ethics, our arche of ethics, which is that the notion of this human agathos, this greatest good for us, which of course it's all leading up to eudaimonia, our happiness, if you want to call it that. But again, be careful of that. It's our flourishing, our happiness. It's a dynamic notion. It's an activity of soul in accordance with arete. But remember, activities of soul can be all like an activity of soul is nutrition. That's plants and animals in us. It's not what we're talking about here. An activity of soul is sensation and movement. Well, animals in us. That's not uniquely human. That's not the arche of ethics. The arche of ethics is going to be related to something that's uniquely human. It's going to be connected to reason, and reason govern action. But as we're going to see, it's not just all about reason. Reason's critical. It might even be the dominant one, but that's not the whole story, because activities of soul also involve emotions. All right? So emotions are going to be an important part of happiness and ultimately of ethics. So even when you try to translate Aristotle into the idiom of what should I do and how should I behave and those kinds of things that we normally think about with ethics, Aristotle is going to return with an answer that does involve the emotions. So he's not saying that it's just reason and pure reason, but it's how reasons and emotions interact. That's the uniquely human, and that's what he wants to explore when he talks about the activities of soul in accordance with Arte. So all this is going to be split up and divided into various things and analyzed in different perspectives. So we'll return to that in some upcoming videos, but this is your first arake. This the starting point of ethics. This is what the rest of the entire Nicomachean Ethics is trying to unpack. Stay tuned for the next video where we look at this in more detail.